The Finance Committee, good morning. The Finance Committee will be called to order at 10:08 on April 20th. All members are present. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda or modify?
Madam Chair, are the essays that are in front of us on the agenda? There's an essay and an FT. Are they,
Yes, Madam.
are they not?
Yes, Alderwoman Finlayson, I would entertain a motion that we delay those supplementary appropriations until the end of the meeting so that we can focus on the presentations at hand.
Madam Chair, I just want to amend something wrong here. I want to amend the agenda to include these two items. That was going to be the...
Oh, they're on the agenda under a heading.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
the heading is on the agenda, so you won't have to amend.
I had the same
But
question.
also, if you delay them, it's for the planning and zoning departments, and you have them here. That's why they have them on. So if you put them to the end, they would have to stay after they make their presentation.
They're both planning and zoning?
Yes.
Okay. That motion, did it get seconded? Well,
question.
It wasn't seconded.
Point of information, please. Are these two items, I do not see them. I see supplemental appropriations, but there's no specifics as to what they are.
Right.
So my motion was to specifically add SA 22 and FT 922 to the agenda and to move the amended agenda.
Okay. Just point of clarification, I understood that that wasn't necessary yesterday. That's why we didn't do it yesterday, and we can do it today. Is that okay? All right. So that's on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. So we will discuss those later. Can I have a motion for the approval of yesterday's meeting minutes, April 19th, 2022?
Motion to approve yesterday.
Second?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All righty. We are going to proceed with the presentations. Just if you allow me some license as chair here. We don't want to exceed the 3 hours. However, we're in a tough position because our budget is supported, by 70% of property tax, which is paid by the constituents. So it is our job to do our due diligence and to make sure that the budget is structurally sound. That's our task at hand. So questions pertaining to the budget are always accepted. So therefore, I've allowed about a half an hour for Q&A, which sort of backs you into presentations of about 30 to 45 minutes. We have you and we have the Office of Law. I understand your slides are addressing, the questions that were asked by you for this, from the city manager, and we don't want to shortchange that. So, and also, the time is also out of respect for the Finance Committee, who have spent a lot of time preparing this budget, and they are here really only to answer questions. So we want to make sure that their time is well spent. So with that, you can proceed.
Madam Chair, members of the council, my name is Michael Malinoff. I'm the acting Planning and Zoning Director. To my right are the people who make the department run and put this presentation together. And I'm not saying that to blame them if there's anything wrong, but they actually did put it together. And that's Maria Brown and Keita Winley. And I've worked with these two over the years, and they're outstanding employees. Not to mention Takia, who's next to you, who we've also worked together, and she too is outstanding. First, slide 1 goes over the planning and zoning staffing summary. What I do want to make note of, and I had noticed this when reviewing the slides, is there is one position not included in here, which is the low-income specialist. That was part of a hiring through the issue having to do with the consent decree in HACA that we made in January of this year. I know you all have met Denise, and she is on staff and doing quite a good job working on that and other related issues with Teresa Wellman. So we actually have 33 positions, and then proposed for FY23 is 34 positions, which includes a new, I call it a deputy zoning officer, but it's a zoning compliance officer, which was a position that came up in your work session in December, where the council requested that we look at adding that position. Frankly, as background, it's something I'm very familiar with, having been involved with this department before, but also in other communities. What we're looking at right now in that position, and obviously with a new director coming on in next month, it'll certainly be his in the department's direction, but something that I've often thought would help here, which is off hours inspector, perhaps on weekends and evenings, where there's a lot going on and where we're sometimes lacking in enforcement. We used to have a call-in roster for all our inspectors. That was done away with a couple of city managers ago, but without that, we're sort of lacking on off hours unless it's an emergency. So with this position is similar to one that I had in Newport, Rhode Island, where we called them deputy zoning officers. They'd work Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Thursday, Friday, evening, Saturday, Sunday, and would be able to make sure things are being done correctly when people know we're not around. And hopefully we'll be able to hire people. Right now with COVID and what's been going on the last few years, people want different schedules. So I'm hopeful, but obviously with the new director, we'll see where it goes. That's the only position change. The organization chart is the same as last year. We have the three divisions, two main divisions, planning and zoning, and then permits and inspections, planning and zoning, current planning, comprehensive planning, community and economic development, which was combined last year. And then in permits and inspections, we have historic preservation, building trades and inspections, and property maintenance inspections. And nothing is being proposed different this year other than the additional person that I had just mentioned. Some of the highlights for FY22, what I think is most important, and there are many, but is the implementation of the Intergov permitting software system. Maria primarily has been the point on that. In fact, she was the point on Trackit back in 2008 as well. And that permitting system was state-of-the-art then, and we were ahead of the curve compared to many communities. But as we all know, as software and companies merge, they no longer become supported. And so they've gone through a search process preceding me. I'm familiar with the system. I had done some research on them prior to coming here for another employment. And I think, according to Maria, they're looking at possibly at or around the start of the new fiscal year or the end of this fiscal year for that conversion. The advantage of that will be hopefully all electronic. There'll be an enhancement that I'll be talking about a little bit later having to do with monitors that are associated with that. But this is more current software and will allow the submission electronically, review electronically, and issuing of permits electronically. If you've ever been in our department, you will wonder, as I did when I first walked in, whether the floors were going to sandwich down for the first floor because of all the paper. Not that that can all go away quickly, but hopefully with this system it'll start to be eliminated. The Village of Providence Point, when I came back here and David said, guess what? I said, oh, that's still going on. Well, actually, it was a success story, and it went through the Planning Commission with 55, I think, conditions and community support, and is a real good success story on staff, what's the right word for it? I was going to say persevering through a difficult process and coming up with what I think is the right solution. And I think it's something the community and it can be proud of. The comprehensive plan is ongoing. Many of you met with Eric, and he says he's about 70–80% done, and that's of the utmost importance. We're obviously working with the city dock redevelopment, the ward's boundaries, and I'll just go through, skim through. I mentioned hiring the low-income housing specialist, really good employee and a very critical piece of our organization. And Denise is developing that relationship with the housing authority. That's very important, and has been directly involved in the Choice Grant project, the program that we're working on together. The Military Installation Resilience Response Study is working with the Navy, Naval Academy on issues having to do primarily with climate change and things of that nature that we're all having to address, certainly with the city dock redevelopment, but without the Navy doing their part, it's just a piece of the puzzle. Parklets program, Stephen Rice and Hope have worked very hard on that. We're in the process of working on the implementation of R2222, acknowledging Alderman Arnett, and we're working on putting together the study associated with that. Right now it's 60 days, right? And hopefully be able to complete that study in time for the council. Maynard Burgess House project, also a project that's been going on for quite a while, is moving along, and John Tower is very pleased with that, hopefully being completed sometime this year. We received a $200,000 grant for the Robert Eads Park, my old friend, and established Team Hoppy to begin the development of the Hoppy Adams House and Cultural and Historic Center. FY23 goals, again, complete the installation and launching of Intergov. Some of the challenges you have when you have an existing system and a new system is how to balance having the new system operating at the same time as the old one as you do the conversion. And Maria was just telling me that there is going to be a little bit of a parallel process during the conversion. When you go from paper to an electronic process, it's, I won't say easier, it's culturally more difficult because you're going from paper to electronic, but you have it all in your hands and you're moving it into an electronic system. When you have two electronic systems, they don't always speak to each other, and that's something that will be a challenge, but I understand there is going to be a parallel system for a little while, and I think that'll help while we start to make the total conversion. Other items, increase the awareness of the moderately priced dwelling unit program, very important. Obviously a need in this community, in many communities like ours. I've seen it around the country, many resort-oriented communities and second home communities where having affordable housing, low income, much less moderately priced housing can be a challenge. And increasing the urban tree canopy. I note there was a question from one of the other council members, and we'll be having answers to those in writing as well. Economic development, raise the profile of Annapolis for the recruitment of businesses to the city. One of the really neat things about having a little tenure is I never thought I'd see the day that our Main Street would perhaps be more, let's just say, competitive than the mall. For so many years, whether it was the mall or parole, we'd see this kind of movement out of our businesses, and it would be difficult for us to be competitive. I think one of the things that COVID has done has changed the perspective that people have on shopping and wanting to be outside and having that kind of experience, life experience. Now, parole imitates that a little bit in its own way, but the mall doesn't. And I think there's been a rejuvenation of our Main Street and our businesses. It's really kind of neat to see. And I never thought I'd see it again, and it's happening. Long-term goals, ensure all rental units are safe and sanitary. Certainly a long-running program in this department, as well as working with ACA on the consent decree as well. Support and analyze inclusive and resilient local economy by increasing local businesses and minority business participation in the procurement process. The one that I've seen us working on closely is the Home and Garage project, as well as others. Protect and catalog all archaeological artifacts currently in city storage units. John Tower has talked to me about it and said that they've made a lot of progress on that. And then rewrite Title 15 harbors and waterfront areas, and review and rewrite Title 21 planning and zoning. I'll leave the latter to the new director. I will say the former, we're actually underway. We have hired a former city employee to work with Kevin Scott on the rewrite of certain sections of Title 15, and that is underway. And hopefully will be done within the summer. Our performance measures, the number of training from current planning, the number of training opportunities attended by staff in each division, very important. From licenses and permits, ensure customer satisfaction with the review process being quick, which is 99.7% within our, is it how many days?
Within 3 days,
For 3
the
days.
initial review and sending out for initial review. Thanks to Lakita. She gets them out within that period of time.
And it's neat to me, because I came from a very large county just recently, and then a county before that we installed a system, is that all of that's within Track It Now and will be in Intergov, where people can go on and see when things were moved from one point to another. And I'm pleased to see that it's working so well.
Make sure your mic is on when you talk so we can hear you. You're fine, but you're...
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. From license and permits, investigate alleged code violations promptly, 48.7%, and that also is 3 days. Yep. And economic development, number of businesses recruitment missions completed. Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to do that during COVID, and we wanted to report that that was one that we weren't able to achieve this year. Enhancement requests. There are 5 within the budget. One that was added beyond what we had asked for relating to the new director. But the zoning compliance officer, that position, as I mentioned before, came from a request from the workshop of the council and will hopefully augment our current enforcement efforts at times of the week and days where we currently are not present. The needs for expanding our urban forest are very well documented. I do want to say that I have some numbers from a prior year presentation on the tree canopy, and the numbers I have are only from 2011 to 2017, so they need to be updated. But from what I have, and this is from last year's presentation, there's been a 78.5 acre net loss of tree canopy, and it went from a 43.6% coverage in 2011 to 41.7% in 2017, with an absolute loss of 1.89%. And there's some detail behind that, but I know that that was a question asked by
Could you repeat that,
Alderperson Savage.
Mr. Malinoff, please?
Yes, and I'll provide it in writing to
Okay.
you all, but I will give you what I have. there's been, these are statistics from 2011 to 2017, and it's a 78.5 acres of net loss, 43.6% coverage in 2011, dropped down to 41.7% in 2017, for a 1.89% absolute loss between those 6 years. And it said other notes are tree canopy declined most on residential properties, and there's additional notes I can provide associated with that. That's why Brian had asked for the additional monies for forestry, $15,000. That was a enhancement request, and will hopefully go towards enhancing our urban tree canopy. Increase for training, dues, memberships for new director. Obviously, when you have somebody new in and what their goals are. One-time planning and zoning review. This was in, I think, this year's budget, and it wasn't done. And with the new director, I think it's a great idea.
Sorry, for him to do it, sorry.
Right. No, it's not so much that. Not that I don't mind doing it. But think about a new person coming in. They're not familiar with the department, and that gives them the resources and tools to kind of do a review and go through and see what may be worth changing. And then replacement monitors, also a question from Alderman Savage. With the new electronic review system, it's going to be necessary that the inspectors can have a large enough monitor and then monitors and software associated with that so that they can do their reviews and their markups on the not physically on the monitor, but electronically on the monitor. And then we've also reviewed and looked at a larger table for reviews that we're going to lease that'll allow some very detailed reviews of whether it's the trades inspectors, because they're looking at electric conduits or water and sewer hookups and things of that nature. And that's a larger tabletop piece of equipment, almost say half the size of our table, and that allows them to detail. And that's what this is all about. And it's also an ADA issue, because you need to have large enough monitors for all the people who are doing the reviews to be able to see and be able to work with them. We're not sure we're going to need all that, but at least it'll allow us to purchase what we will need. General fund budget summary, FY21 actuals, $4.764 million. FY22 original budget, $4.89 million. Adjusted budget for FY22, $4.9592 million. Projected for fiscal year 22 is 4.497, so we're about 100,000 under budget. And proposed for FY23, is 4.829. And part of that, as you will see if you haven't, have you had other hearings before us? Is there's a built-in increase that the finance department wanted us to put into the budgets, as well as our enhancements.
Could you elaborate on that?
I think it was 3%.
Director Dickinson can explain, or
So what's
Whoever was
in
first.
those, we determine those amounts. The departments do not determine the amount to go in salary and benefits, that's us. And what you see now in the departments is the step increases for 23. The cost of living increases are budgeted in one single line item, in finance non-allocated, because we haven't finished the union negotiations.
Right.
So these numbers will be ultimately higher than what you're seeing here once we finish the negotiations. And this increase that you see here would be a combination of things. You're looking at actual versus the budget, and we have, in benefits, you'll see a savings this year because we have a health care holiday that we're enjoying right now. we don't have one budgeted for next year, and we likely won't have one next year. So some of those increases you see are because of the benefits increase, and some of it's because of the steps for 23.
So just so that we understand, you have a placeholder in the budget
In finance non-allocated, there's a placeholder amount.
So we don't suspect an increase? Is that an estimated amount? Or do you
The amount that's in finance non-allocated right now
Right,
to address the results of the union negotiations and cost of living increases is 3.7 million for the entire general fund.
okay.
A good chunk of that's gonna go, of course, to public safety. The other departments will get some of that too. So in the end, hopefully, before we finish the budget, we'll know how much we need to move from the 3.7 million to these budgets, and you will see these budgets then increase.
Excellent.
And if we don't have that information before we close the budget, we'll have to do it in July, in a fund transfer in July.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sorry if I
No.
misspoke, but I remember you bringing this up at the work.
You were correct, but I just wanted to clarify, because we've talked about the 3.7 million that's somewhere else for the COLA.
Right, and you had talked a little bit about this at the work session in December as well, so, if I recall. And so the planning and zoning funds, reforestation, I frankly don't know the funds that well, but the expenses have frankly greatly, when we asked for the enhancement that we got, Brian had said that he was over budget by 25,000, which was, as a result of why we were asking for the additional monies, and the total being proposed expenses-wise is 83,000. Community legacy, I am not that familiar with that fund. Are you aware?
I'm wondering if that has to do with the loan.
Okay. I'll have to let you know about that one. I'm sorry. And then Housing Assistance Trust, which Teresa Wellman and Denise operate, and then the Cdbg Funds, which I think was, well, as Teresa had mentioned to me, decreased this year, the funding. It's closer to what you would see in FY21, but I imagine there was a couple of years because of the CARES Act that this was increased. But I'll have to give you that information too. And the proposed budget pie chart, and we are 2.4%, and that's it.
What
Could open up for questions.
on the pie chart, what did you say again?
Oh, it's 2.4% of the total general fund.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That was excellent.
I think that was within the time period.
No, it wasn't just that. It was the fact that you addressed everything. I have just two questions. It's in the budget book, but it's the $50,000 for Downtown Annapolis Partnership Program.
Right.
What is that exactly, and what kind of return on investment is that? Is that the Main Street program, which was the genesis of it? And I'm not sure if we have that anymore.
Let me give you the details from my notes earlier.
On page 7.
Where is that?
It's on my desk.
The most important part of that question is.
It's the Downtown Annapolis Partnership Program.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just associated with the projects they work on. I mean, we also put monies, $20,000 for the Downtown Annapolis Partnership, Annapolis and Bloom, and $15,000 for Arts and Entertainment District pass-through. So I can't tell you exactly what they're spending it on, but I'll find out.
I just hear different things that it pays for a salary, and that's fine. I just want to know if that's part of the if that is the Main Street program, which I hear a lot about, which I hear that we do have it and we don't have it, and having that does give us the opportunity to get some money. Can anybody speak to that? I guess the first question is, do we have the Main Street program? I think that goes way back to.
So what do you mean by a Main Street program? The $50,000 has been in place for many years, and we give it as a grant to Downtown Annapolis Partnership. I'm not familiar with exactly what they do with the $50,000 and what a Main Street program is. There's $20,000 for the flowers.
Right.
So that's on top of that.
Right.
So you're not talking about the flower program.
Nope. I just want to
I mean, I may be able to call up
program.
and may be able to find the agreement for the 50,000.
Yeah.
See if I could find that in my email and look and see what they're doing for those for that 50,000.
City manager.
We can help with
Yeah.
that as well.
Yeah, so they still have an active program. As you know, Eric
Yes.
Evans is still their executive director, and
Yes.
he advertises things and he pulls events together. So he's very active still.
Yes.
I haven't seen a breakdown of how he spends that money, but we could certainly get that from him.
No, and Brian Callahan is setting up a meeting with him and me, but we haven't had that yet, so I can get more information for you.
If you could just check into this Main Street program. I mean, I'm hearing that from the state level too, if we have it, because it does give us an opportunity to get some state grants, et cetera. And I thought that was part of the Downtown Annapolis Partnership charge. So my last question is historic preservation, and it's John Towers, chief. You're the department head. I defer to you on, is that job doable as one person? I saw though that you have some consulting money for him. I know the job involves not only site visits, but also staff reports. And with the upcoming construction and the properties that we're working on, are you comfortable with the consultant? I see that is that a one-time expense, Director Dickinson, for the HPC consultant? Where did I see that? Yeah, $17,000 for HPC consultant. Is that recurring or is that a one-time? Page.
That's a reoccurring cost.
Okay. So you have one position plus the consultant to address, and you're comfortable
And
with
then Sherry Pippin is also,
part of that?
yes,
Okay.
full-time. It's a very important component of our city,
Right.
having the historic district and having it properly reviewed and administered. And I can say that it is very challenging for a small team to be able to keep up with it.
Right.
And so is it quite enough staffing? Probably not. One of the challenges that the department has frankly, I've heard some of your colleagues mention from cuts from a decade or two ago, clerical support, things of that nature that the department doesn't have, and particularly in zoning in that division. So, but I would say that the HPC is stretched pretty thin.
Okay. All right.
And he works very hard doing
Yeah.
it. And I like the fact that you have somebody who's been a contractor doing it too, and is very familiar with the industry from that end as well.
Okay. So noted. Thank you. Questions? Okay. Alderwoman Finlayson?
Thank you. Mr. Malinoff, I'm looking at page 11, with the breakdown for reforestation, community legacy, and housing assistance trust. Two of those categories, I assume, are in the red. Is that correct? Am I reading it correctly?
So-
We're proposing a negative number?
So one of the reasons that's showing negative is because those funds are going to be spending some of their fund balance that they've accumulated. So the total expenses you see there exceed the revenue that we anticipate coming in next year, because they're going to spend their fund balance that they have accumulated next year as well.
So they get to carry over?
Yes, these are separate funds, and separate funds get to carry over their fund balance. And if you remember, one of the early schedules in the book, let's say,
Page 20.
I would direct you to 15, which has a summary by fund.
The pie chart?
No, in the budget book, page 15.
I added my
yes,
pie chart in there, so sorry.
It's a page, it's a summary schedule in the front of the book, and it has notes there. And the column there on the right with the negative amounts are funds that are going to be spending from their fund balances, and these funds would be included.
Okay,
So we have to provide a budget, an expense budget that's higher than the revenues they anticipate to come in next year, because we need to give them the spending authority for the fund balance as well. So you're seeing a negative only because they're spending fund balance.
okay, thank you. Mr. Malinoff, the Housing Assistance Trust, do we have standards? I know Ms. Wellman runs that, along with many other programs probably. Do we have a means of determining how those funds are dispersed? And I'll tell you why. I received a call from a banker who was trying to help one of our residents purchase a first-time home buyer program. And he's called and said, can we borrow some money from out of the city's trust? And it's like, I don't know. So that's my question. How do we determine that?
Well, it's largely been Teresa, but she also has a committee that she works with that I've met with a couple of times that reviews these matters as well. And one of the things that she's talked to me about, and she's working on that committee with, is using these kinds of funds for the moderately priced dwelling unit program and things like soft seconds and assisting people to purchase homes in the city. So as far as I can tell, that she and Denise administer it, but they have a committee that they work with that is chaired by Kathy Ebner, who had worked for years as the executive director of Homes for America, right?
Okay.
And they develop standards, and there are a couple of members of the council who meet with them pretty regularly too.
Okay, so that's to whom I should direct any other questions.
Yeah, and that would be the forum to direct it. And Teresa and I've talked a lot about it. I had when I went to law school, worked on a soft second program that was really quite good that the city of Baltimore had. And so we're talking about different ways using the funds and applying them towards something such as you mentioned.
I'm a little bit confused. Are you talking about soft seconds that we would provide? And is that how this is done?
If a soft second through a fund like this is something that we're looking at possibly providing, and what that would allow is if somebody came in and was, say, buying a moderately priced dwelling unit and needed assistance on their closing costs. And generally the way those work is they are amortized over a period of time on the amount that you would have to pay back. whether it's 5 years or 10 years. Say if you lived in it for 5 years and it's amortized over that period of time, you don't pay any of it back. But if you left after a year, you'd pay 80 and so on. And those are the things we're talking about, because there are some moderately priced dwelling units coming on the market here, fairly soon. Parkside is one, for example, and there are others that may be coming on down the line. So, and the reason it came up is, even so, those houses aren't inexpensive because of the income level and housing costs in the city. So, but it was more of a general discussion we were having on the use of the funds.
Well, our residents, many of them surely could use such a program, so I hope it will move forward.
And I would have your banker, the contact us, me or Teresa, because one of the things that we talked about is working in conjunction with a lender. And also it helps to have it in conjunction with a title attorney and people that are familiar with it, because then the costs can be made smaller. And some banks, and this had been in the past, have in their charter a requirement to provide a certain amount to the community.
Well, there seem to be banks that are eager to be part of a program like this, so I think we should take advantage of their interest. My next question has to do with page 9, your enhancements. Are those, any of them included in the mayor's budget?
They all
of
are.
those are.
They all are?
They all are, yes.
Oh, so you guys aren't coming to us to ask for anything? Is there
Well,
another list somewhere that I missed?
I'm looking over at David and Jody, and seeing
look
that
at
I've
them.
sat in those seats before, I'm not going to do it, or I'd be struck down by lightning for being a hypocrite.
So everything's included in?
Yes,
Oh, you guys are good. Thank you.
we made our case well.
If I
job.
could could just add, so the zoning compliance officer, because we were very frugal with adding positions, but when we had the budget priority meeting with the council last fall, that was a message that came through loud and clear over and over as we went around so that was, we added that because of that, not because planning and zoning asked for it, but because it was identified by the council. Let's see, on-time P&Z review, that's carryover money from last year. So that was something that was fun. And he talked about that earlier, Mike did. But that's something that we still want to do. It was just sort of in limbo with the change of directors, that we felt like it was better to carry over that money and do that next year.
The last 2 items are one-time items, so we're using the one-time funds for those 2.
And if I can make another clarification, zoning compliance officer, the total amount that we have budgeted, including benefits, is $100,000.
So, I'm sorry, say that again?
The total amount that we have budgeted for the zoning compliance officer, including benefits, is $100,000.
Yeah, that's noted in the detail of the
Okay. But
of our budget. But what I would say is and I was told by John Manasseh to make sure is with that position comes the overhead that was mentioned, benefits, and then other items that go along with the job relating to a vehicle and things of that nature.
So I think I understood Ms. Connolly to say it was 100,000. So usually benefits are about 30%, but that's closer to 50%. If the compliance officer is $54,000.
We have that position budgeted at $62,000.
Okay, so what's this amount then?
I guess we put in too low.
I will clarify that when we put positions in the budget, we don't necessarily put them at step 1. That might be step 1.
Okay.
We have a lot of them that are being filled above step 1. So what we do is we usually do step 6. So that may be the difference there. And the benefits are, I would say, closer to 20% plus. We allow $25,000 for health care. In case they choose the most expensive plan, because we don't know who we're going to hire. So our 100 is a conservative number.
Well, I'm glad you're considering all the options as far as support. Are there any additional expenses by virtue of the job that's being done?
Yes, and that's also why it's good that it's 100,000. I don't know whether there's other vehicles in the city fleet, but this individual would need to be able to have a vehicle to be able to patrol, a cell phone, computer system, things like that. So that's the general overhead associated with positions. Did I leave anything out? No.
Do we usually charge for, and this is to Mr. Gerald and Ms. Dickinson, for use of vehicles?
So, yeah, so I was just going to add that if we have to get a new vehicle in the fleet, that has other ramifications, but even if Danny has an additional vehicle they can use, this fund will, the planning and zoning will then be charged for an additional vehicle, but it may not get added mid-year. It may be the following year before it gets added into the budget. But yes, those costs will impact the budget eventually.
Okay, so I probably shouldn't ask this question, but if it's an old vehicle, do they get charged less? If it's a new vehicle, do they get charged more?
I'm not sure. Danny has his table of rates, and I'm not sure if age comes into it or not. It's usually by type of vehicle, model, and make and model. So Katie may know more about the chart that he gives us.
Scooter for downtown.
I mean, if it's an older car, you would expect more repair and maintenance, right? But I think Danny tries to do a good job of allocating costs equally. And Jody is correct, it's by the type of vehicle, it's how he allocates his costs.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just to piggyback on that, is that position, is it a compliance officer? Does he have any sort of compliance certification, or is he just working in the interest of the city to enforce the code?
Zoning and code enforcement. So there isn't any particular certification that I know of associated with it. And I did want to mention we do have one vacancy in our combo inspector that we are in the process of trying to fill. Okay. Very important position. And Henry Gutierrez retired around the first of the year, and it's been difficult to hire along the lines of your question because of the amount of certifications that are required for the position, because the person has to be able to be certified in the international code and as a combination inspector, which includes the trades and building.
And Director Dickinson, I don't want to take the time now, but maybe afterwards I'll sit down with you and go over page 15 and 16 as far as the internal transfer of the fund, just so that I understand it. I think I do, but I just want to make sure. Alderwoman O'Neill.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation. I, for one, am in full support of that off-hours inspector. As a person who lives in an area that is often faced with people doing work illegally and whatnot, and being frustrated that there's nobody to come out. My question was going back to the reforestation, and if I can find it again, and how that plays out. And you talked about it being a negative number because they have funds too. Is that correct? Because they have funds to spend down.
Just, yes, if you look at, yes, it's negative. When this question came up before, page 15, if you look at the line item on page 15 for the reforestation fund, you'll see that we're anticipating new revenues coming in at 20,000, but we're giving them spending authority for 83,000, and that will allow them to spend down their fund balance. What we anticipate their fund balance will be at the end of this year.
All right. And are those projects neighborhood specific, ward specific, or is it across the city? Do you have is there a plan?
I think it's across the city. I mean, the plan that the division has, or the department has, is through the city, is to reach a goal of 50% by 36 of the tree canopy. And as I mentioned, I do aerial photography to see where that is. That as of 2017, that was 41.7%. So the benchmark is to plant and retain maximum amount of tree cover at development sites, retain contiguous forests in connected tree corridors wherever possible, protect the health of existing trees, and include street trees along paths, sidewalks, and streets. And the performance measure is to increase the tree canopy by 0.54% a year. And I had mentioned the one project at Providence Point and how diligent in the amount of work and effort that's put in the retaining of the forest there, and then adding street trees and other trees that are being provided by the developer on top of our fund. So the long answer to that is it's spread out through the ward, and some of it has to do with things that come up through storm and so on.
Director Dickinson, you have
Yes, so the question, if you're directing it towards the reforestation fund, that money, it has two pots of money. Critical area, fees that come in for doing things in the critical area are then designated for reforestation in the critical area. We then have the non-critical area fees. Those have to be spent in other areas. And those pots of money are managed separately. The program that he was talking about is mostly the general fund where it can be spent citywide.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Tree canopy. The LGAG heard about the latest in measuring tree canopy. So how do we tap into, whether it's Alliance for the Chesapeake or whoever has that data? They have done, I don't know how inclusive it is, but I know it includes our area, a measure of tree canopy, because we always talk about it and we have a goal set for 50%. And there's always discussion that we're not making our designated percentage. But we've never actually done a survey. I think I just heard you say that you use a drone to do some of it.
I don't know how we work with LGAG and other organizations, but I do see in my reference materials a aerial photography that's used. And I remember over the years that we've used it before. I can find out from Brian how often that is done, but I'm fairly certain that it's something that we procure and do on an annual basis.
Well, I know there's a new one, so I don't have, but we should have access to it so that we can be using the right
Okay, we can find out if.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, for the fund balance questions, if you look at page 20, it has a column that says projected FY22 fund balance.
Yes, yes.
Generally, what we do is we take that ending fund balance for 22, add anticipated revenues for 23.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. That's what was my question was. I didn't know where we were getting that that I couldn't make the link between page, the transfer page, I call it, and where we were getting that money from. So thank you so much for that clarification. So I don't need to meet with you afterwards, Dr. Gibson, not on that at least.
I thought you were talking about the issue from this weekend where you were wondering about the excess transferring to the reserves.
Oh, that's another question.
Okay, all right.
Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not very many questions. I'm assuming the consulting work on Title 15 is being paid for out of fiscal 22 dollars?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any anticipation that we will need contract dollars to look at the things that I've been talking with Eric and Stephen Rice in terms of evaluating impacts of changing parking code and also different areas implementing new parking systems, zones, or districts?
To answer that question, yes, and Director Dickinson has been working on identifying funds, I think in FY '22 on that. That has to do with our 22. We recently had some discussions on that funds.
We're working on trying to find some available appropriations to move to planning and zoning for that purpose.
Thank you, wonderful.
Yes, and very much on top of that, and we've been meeting, we've met several times going over it, so.
Okay, I'd like to come to some of those. You know, I'm
Be a
talking
fly
at
on the
bit.
wall.
A program that I think largely occurred after you were gone and before you came back called Weather It Together. Has that just dropped into the sea, as it were? It's the whole huge initiative that Lisa Craig was doing, and involved the Navy and the Army Corps of Engineers and a whole bunch of other people looking at the impact of sea level rise.
Well, as I mentioned in our goals earlier, there is a very active, that program, no, I have not heard anything of. But I will say the resiliency program that Eric and others are working on is very active, and the city manager as well.
I was going to weigh in on that. So when Lisa went, and she was replaced, the new, and I'm drawing a blank on her name, Roberta. She focused solely on historic preservation, which Lisa Craig had kind of lost focus on, right? And that's the main focus of that job. But so Jackie Gild and Dave Mandel have a committee, and they meet, I think, quarterly to talk about resilience issues. And of course, Jackie is very focused on resilience issues. And I think that's what most of those were, whether together with sea level rise and other resilience issues so she's taken up the mantle. But I think the old weather together has kind of gone by the wayside, and they're just focused on generally resilience.
A lot of good work and some great cartoons that came up with that. Well, can we either get a report or even better be invited to some of those meetings?
Sure.
I know downtown is the number one priority. It's historic and it is downtown, but some of the rest of us are going to get wet soon too.
Bigger problems lurking out there.
Right.
Okay. If I may, Alderman Arnett, the way I understood yesterday was that Weather Together and some other initiatives were sort of rolled into this overall hazard mitigation plan that they now have. So I don't think the work was lost. It was important because of flooding insurance, et cetera.
Yeah, I meant just the name was lost, I think. Certainly the focus and the program hasn't been, but the name has been.
My last question may be more for finance and the city manager, but this housing assistance fund, we also have this big tap that is put on the hotel tax, 3%. That is supposed to go into housing assistance, but last I knew there was no particular fund for those monies to go into, and it's a non-trivial amount of money. I think we were supposed to have a fund created to receive that
Okay.
tap.
So,
But I don't think it's the same as that is.
so let me just say that the state, you're talking about the 3% of the occupancy tax that last year got designated to go into the Housing Assistance Trust Fund. And the state legislation actually specified that fund, the one we have. So, and it said that fund, it gave the name of the fund in accordance with a previous ordinance that we passed to set it up. So we have to put the money in that fund. It is in that fund. And that's why you see that number, that amount has climbed a bit. Part of that pot of money.
Slide 11, and
Okay.
it's on 12-2.
Slide 11.
The housing assistance trust.
Okay, can you put that back up, slide 11? Okay, so if you look here with the Housing Assistance Trust Fund, you'll see that for 23, they have, is that 682?
Right.
Of 682,000, that's a big number. That's both Teresa Wellman's piece that she uses for the mortgage assistance and the closing cost assistance. And it's also got the 3% of the occupancy tax in there. And it is not a non-trivial amount. For half of this fiscal year, we have put almost $60,000 in that fund for the housing. The state stipulated it had to be used for rental assistance. So there's currently 60. We think it's going to be about 120 when we finish this year. 120,000 of that fund is rolled into next year there to be spent for rental assistance.
So,
Plus, we'll have more from next year to put in there. That's why the 682 is so much higher.
right, so is there a breakdown that
I can get you a breakdown. We have them separated in our accounting system.
more important, are there rules and regulations or procedures for people to be able to get that assistance?
Not yet. Recently, Alderman Gay has talked about working with Teresa Wellman to come up with the criteria that we need to look at to have people tap that source.
Is that in Human and Welfare Committee? You're on that, right?
Yes, and let me, I'm not sure if this question is appropriate, but I'll ask anyways. Is some of that money, is it able to be used for our city housing properties?
So the state wasn't really, the only thing I recall from the legislation specifically is it says it must be used for rental assistance. It doesn't give a lot of detail. So I think that's what Teresa and Alderman Gay were going to work out, what fits that definition. And so, yes, it could be, I suppose, for any rental assistance program. It's just, how you set those criteria and who would be eligible to apply for it and what kind of assistance you want to provide.
Well, may I follow up? So who controls these dollars? I know there's no program really set up yet.
Correct.
But along with setting it up, is there going to be a process?
That's what I believe Alderman Gay and Teresa Wellman are working on, setting up the process and the policies for passing out that funding for rental assistance.
And then who will actually handle it? Will that be something else
That would
on
be
Ms.
Teresa Wellman, I
Wellman's?
think. I think
Well-
Teresa Wellman will continue to manage
So,
that.
so yes, but she has also expressed that it's kind of not in her lane, that it's more housing assistance, and not, she does improvements. She does the housing lending piece for closing costs and community development, and her thought is this is a little bit different lane, but she is willing to work with Alderman Gay to try to put something together for this, because they do this kind of thing at the county as well.
Well, and that's good that they're working together to create the policy. Now I'm talking about the implementation.
Right.
So is there another staff person in the planning department that will be able to pick this up and
Well,
manage it?
Denise, that I had mentioned earlier, is come on board, and she has this kind of background as well.
Okay.
And with the committee that I've sat in on a couple of the meetings, they are talking actively about, with Alderman Gay and Sandemeyer, on creating the opportunities through whether it's the missing middle programs and then how that will be administered. I'm not saying they're there yet, but they're certainly trying to work it out. And we, as I mentioned earlier, talked about different aspects of how you would apply the monies to housing that actually is coming up fairly soon at Parkside Preserve.
Okay.
So if I could follow up on the follow-up, I think Denise is eminently qualified to do this work from her background, but I thought she was really supposed to be focusing on the consent decree. Is there enough of leftover time? I just want to make sure, first of all, I think we really need to get some pressure to get these monies deployed. Housing assistance doesn't do any good if you don't get the assistance. But I'm hoping that we have a staff person, and it would really be good to have a staff person to sort of get backfilled and trained on what Teresa does. So we have some succession planning there. So I'm hoping that that is something where Denise would have the time to work on this.
Well, I just happen to have the job description here. And the job summary is acts as an affordable housing developer for the city of Annapolis to promote, expand, and match housing options for low-income residents utilizing federal, state initiatives and funding sources to meet those needs. And that obviously, in addition to that, she's working on the consent decree in the Housing Authority, but on that committee as well. So yes, she does have that skills, and she's very poised and has a strong background.
As an aside, I think it would really be helpful if she could find the time to come to the Housing Authority board meetings. They're obviously in a very anxious situation, and I think they'd like to see more city faces. I think she came
She did
to the last board meeting,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah,
Teresa did too.
We just talked about that earlier this morning because
Excellent.
she's developing her relationship with the executive director. And, the really good thing about somebody with Denise's background is her experience, but she also has the poise and the leadership ability to weigh in without fear.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to everyone. And I'm going to echo Alderwoman O'Neill in saying that the housing inspector is definitely a great addition. We definitely need it in my ward. I know Maria and Lakita, I'm sure, aware of the weekend phone calls sometimes and the weekend requests. But anyway, today is not a weekend, but while you have been talking the last 3 minutes, I received an email from a resident. Good morning. I just got 3 calls for a trailer at the dispensary on West Street. Do they need a permit? My response, I can't say since the dispensary is located in the county, not in the city. However, is the trailer on the parking lot that is in the city? And the response is right in front, I'm calling the county. I said, I'll let the city know as well. I'm currently in budget briefing publicly with planning and zoning, perfect timing email. So just to let you know, I don't know how that's all going to work out, but I don't know if you want to, because we're not sure at this point if the trailer, first of all, needs a permit, but if it's in the city or the county. So
when we go back, we'll make sure Mary or John know.
thank you all so much. And secondly, regarding staffing, clerical support and any other support, I know in the past you all have had maybe interns. Is that available? Is that something you've thought about? College interns or those who definitely can benefit from all of you all's expertise in this area?
Yes, we have. I mean, it's something that I'm trying to remember who I got the request from. Maybe it was Human Resources and Tricia, but I forwarded that to Eric Lashinsky and Tom Smith for interns. But the clerical support really is more, frankly, a little bit more of a professional long-term position because most of that is being done by the individual planners and staff that are professionals in their own field, not necessarily in clerical support.
Okay. And I think it would really be a great idea to look at city residents, young people. And I know one summer, Maria and I had planned a pop-up camp to do a tour of the downtown area, and we were going to provide them with lunch. But the day we were supposed to do it, it was really, really hot, so we had to postpone it. We never did reschedule. But that's an opportunity for young people to see what we do have in the city and to bring them downtown to see what we have in conjunction with what you're saying, where there's a rejuvenation of city-centric things going on downtown. So I think that's a perfect opportunity, no matter the age. Middle school would be better, but even high schoolers, and that brings the interest to them, and therefore they may be in the planning and zoning department at some point. But it's great. It's a great resume builder as well.
As you may know, Planning and Zoning worked with the Anne Arundel County Green Summer Works program, I would say probably for about 7 years.
Okay.
And then unfortunately, they dissolved. They paid the students, and they were high school students that were about to go to college. We were always asked to take an additional intern, and we always said yes, and we did. And we would have 2 to 3 students come into the office 5 days a week for about 6 to 8 weeks in the summertime. And even though it may have seemed like, you know, because they're in high school, they didn't do much, we realize now that we don't have them, which we realized it then too, but they were really beneficial in helping us get our paper into our electronic system. You know, the papers have to be scanned, they have to be attached to the proper permits and then named. And we were able to get rid of boxes and boxes and boxes of paper using the interns. But with the staff and no interns, we don't have time to do that the way that we would like to. So we would love to have students help us do those kinds of things.
You might want to contact Anne Arundel Workforce Development Corporation. I meet with Kurt Murray, the executive director, every couple months.
Okay.
They might be able to, as well as the Community Action Agency, they have a new program as well. So between those two, maybe you can rejuvenate that program, but I think it's a win-win for everybody. And oftentimes certain areas of concentration normally don't come within the black and brown community. So to me, that I think would be extremely helpful on all fronts.
I'll definitely contact them.
Okay, and I'll email you the contact information.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the third question, my last question, is about the tree canopy. And you talked about the aerial photography. Can we get a breakdown by ward?
I don't see why not. What I have is a very small rendering of that, but we can ask Brian and frankly, Sean is a very talented GIS person, so she can probably do the ward boundaries on top of what we receive. But we'll ask.
Because we can roll that at least next year into maybe greenscape.
Right.
Okay.
Right, and then focus in on areas that.
Exactly. That could be a greenscape project, so.
Good.
Okay, thank you all so much. This
You're
is
welcome.
wonderful. You all do a great job.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Finlayson has a follow-up.
Yeah, follow up on the summer jobs, because you recall before pandemic, I used to do the Annapolis Youth Summer Jobs Program, and we had students from the high school who we paid to work in the city, and we placed them in the law department, all over the city. So I'm hoping now that things are opening up again that we can do that again. And the young lady, and I think it's Autumn, who worked with you, last name Sims, I think she's graduating next month from college, and in a degree in urban planning, if I'm not mistaken. And I contend that it was her experience working with you guys for a summer. She was an equestrian and gave up horses for planning, you figure.
From my experience, very smart person.
Her father probably says the same thing. Can't make much of a living. Well, maybe you can, but it's rare. So anyway, there's tremendous benefits in having young people work. And of course, I'm always advocating that we pay for the work that we get.
You know I'm for it because that's how I got here.
Right. Very talented. And I will say, building on that idea, one area that we really have recurring needs is, and you mentioned the black and brown communities, is in our inspectors, and the ability to come into that with background in building or trades and being able to come into our office. We lost Henry Gutierrez, who's bilingual, and it's a big need in our department.
Well, you know, I have a nonprofit that's pretty under the radar at the moment, and the purpose is to train high school graduates who find themselves out of high school with nothing to do. They can't go to college, they didn't get into vocational programs, and to get them into a program that will teach them a skill, plumbing, electrical, and after they are trained, and we pay them while they're being trained, then we assure them that we get them a job. And so maybe some of the folks that we have as practitioners may be willing to take on a student who's graduated, a young person, and help to train them, you know, on the job training kind of thing, so they can go on to the certifications that they need to work independently. Once the young people realize how much they can make as a plumber or as an electrician, their attitudes change a little bit, you know. So, you know, maybe at some point when, you know, you're looking at people who you know are ready to retire, they may be willing to help us by taking on a young person and training them. And then we have our own built-in workforce.
That's how my son became an electrician. Mr. Pratt, our electrical inspector, was a neighbor of mine, and we worked together. My son was in trade school, vocational school. So he did come in. We went through HR and got all, and law and got all the legal paperwork taken care of. And he shadowed the electrical inspector and got a job after high school and is still with that company today. So it really means a whole lot. And I think people don't realize how important it is to get them at that stage and let them let them go out on the jobs and see what it's like, because that's what piques their interest. Talking about it in school is fine, and reading it and learning all the, you know, what you're reading is one thing, but going out with the inspectors and going out and seeing what they actually do, I think that really does pump up their desire to want to do better and to go into those trades. And right now, I think it's really important. The trades, I think you know, a lot of our contractors are older.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody's into technology and the computers. And I'm really afraid for our, you know, our trade population. We all need our electric and plumbing and auto mechanics and air conditioning people.
Took me 3 months to find somebody to put in my Ring doorbell. It probably took him 15 minutes to do it, but you know. So yeah, now I know.
And there's a good book I'll recommend to you called Shopcraft is Soulcraft, and it has to do with the very phenomena you mentioned, which is these are good, high-paying jobs that aren't going to go overseas.
What was the name of the book?
Shopcraft is Soulcraft.
Yeah, the president speaks of shovel-ready projects, but we don't have the trades to build them. We're doing okay on time, so I'm going to ask two quick questions. Scooters and bikes, is that a program that is under planning and zoning, and is that planned? We had some kind of a, I don't know if they went out of business or what have you.
Yeah, Mr. Lashinsky has been reviewing that RFP. Mr. City Manager, do you know where, or Jody, do you know where that is? I don't know the status of it, but I do know we're involved.
Yeah, and I know that it's ongoing, but I don't know the status either.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is, they did the RFP. I don't know if they've actually awarded it. We have the vendor that we want to award it to. So I think we're actually working up an agreement. So it must be awarded.
Okay.
And the agreement's not finalized
I know
yet.
some people aren't happy with scooters, but whatever we can get for, I think is it free or sponsored, or we don't know yet?
I don't think it's free. I think it's, the company provides these, and you go on an app and you rent one, and you pay the company to use either the bike or the scooter.
Okay. And lastly, we talk about this all the time, is the permit review and the concerns, complaints, whether they're warranted or not. And I heard you say that, I know we put money in the budget for a review of that process, and I'm happy to hear that that money has not been spent but is carried over, and that the new planning and zoning director will take that on and critique whatever to see what is going on and whether or not it warrants any sort of other, efficiency or what have you. So thank you for that. Any other questions? If not, we're going to go right into the supplementary appropriations, then they concern you. So actually, there's one fund transfer, which by the agenda, I think we do first.
Do they concern us or not?
I heard that they do. Nod your head because it's a way of getting money.
Yes.
I was hoping to take a quick break, but I'll wait.
It shouldn't take too long.
I have here fund transfer 9-22. This transfers $21,000 in appropriations from the general fund contingency account to planning and zoning. The additional appropriations will pay for an
Right.
economic gardening program. Oh, this is what Alderman Schottelmeyer is speaking of.
Correct.
Okay. And after the revision, which we always ask, $202,850 remains available in the contingency account.
Correct.
So could you explain if that is what it is and what it is?
Is that a greeting or a question?
That's I'm not familiar with the economic gardening.
I am somewhat familiar with the program, but not a lot. It is, you're correct, it is something the alderman has been seeking, and some of our staff have been working on it with him, but I don't frankly know the details of it. I know more about the second one, which...
Well, I'm surprised it isn't Office of Economic Development that this
Right,
is going
Stephen has
to.
been working with him on that, Stephen
Okay.
Rice.
Okay.
But I wish I wasn't prepared to address this.
No, that's fine. I didn't want to.
Yeah.
Director Dickinson is.
I have a little more understanding of it. The money will be used to pay a consulting firm that works with businesses that I think it's like a second stage of not startup, but helping them grow to a certain level. And that consultant sits down with these businesses. It won't fund a lot. There's a certain number of businesses to help with that funding, and the consultant will sit down with those businesses and help them work out a strategy for growing to the next level. And so it's called, it initiates that growth and then hopefully provides more economic growth for the city as a whole.
Okay.
So that's the general way the program works.
Oh.
And it is Stephen Rice who's been working on this with Alderman Schandelmeyer.
Okay. All right, so I hope this precludes, I know Alderman Schottelmeyer was speaking of amending the budget to accommodate this. It sounds like we're doing a transfer instead, so. Questions?
Are we ready for a motion? I'll move that we give a favorable recommendation to FT 922.
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. All righty, the second one is a supplementary appropriation grant from the county to the city of Annapolis for HACA capital projects. This will provide funding for Robinwood electrical code upgrades, moisture remediation, Bloomsbury Square elevator repairs, Eastport lead-based paint abatement, no matches required, and the grant was not included in the fiscal year 2022 budget, hence the appropriation. Do I have a motion to?
I'm only familiar because the executive director asked yesterday where this was, and I was communicating to the city manager today, so they'll...
Do you want, okay, I'll explain this one as well. The county came to us, they would like to grant us some funding from their federal funding so that we can pass it through to HACA to help HACA make some of these capital improvements that they're doing on their units. And it's for there's a list of very specific, it's like maybe six or seven items that we're going to use it for. And our role is to review the invoices and then reimburse HACA for the cost.
Are we reimbursing HACA? I mean, HACA pays the bills up front and then reimburse them?
We are supposed to not release the funding until we see the invoices that are presented. So I'm assuming that we're on a reimbursement basis. We're just finalizing the agreement now. And then we'll have to develop, it is probably just coming through finance, since it's just a pass-through.
Did we make the request for HACA? Did somebody in the city?
No, I think HACA worked with the county originally, and they were going to do it right through the county, but the county wanted it to come through us.
The
That's what
number
I was going
looks,
to say too. As the county came to us, they talked to the mayor to see if the mayor, and it was the county exec that talked to the mayor about having it pass through the city. So that was all coordinated. But the county coordinated directly with HACA on what projects would be funded with this. So it's, as Jody mentioned, it's a specific list of projects that are going to be covered.
and that-
Okay, on another note, I asked this the other night and I'm still getting different amounts. What do we know about the pool? And what dollar amount are they needing to operate the pool for the summer? Is it 30,000, 40,000? I heard last night 43,000. I want to be able to take it back to the community organizations that want to raise money, but they can't get their hands
I've heard
around.
34, so maybe somebody reversed those numbers.
I can't.
I heard 34 was the number that I heard. So that's, unless I reverse the numbers, that might be a good question to ask Director Trader tomorrow during his budget hearing, because he's been the point person on trying to find money for that and finding a way to set up a GoFundMe fund, because there's a lot of interest in providing funding for this. And then we plan to backstop it if needed to make sure it opens.
Okay, so Mr. Trader's the one that's handling it.
Yes.
Okay, because the community groups want to know to whom to talk, so I'm going to send them to Archie. Mr. Trader. Okay, thank you.
And Alderwoman O'Neill had, I thought you were done.
Go ahead. No,
I was
I was going to make a motion, but
No, Alderwoman O'Neill had a good point that this is in the HACA report that was released yesterday to the council. So
you mean the Capital newspaper had a story about it?
No.
HACA gave us a report yesterday.
Oh,
for the upcoming work session.
your mic's not on.
Sorry. HACA presented us with their quarterly report, monthly report yesterday, and it was in there asking about the funds.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll move favorable recommendation for SA 2222.
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. Mr.
Thank you,
Malinoff, you
ma'am.
are done. I can't throw that. The wind took it. I can only afford one. I didn't
getting better with
I didn't
the
go to the
throwing.
dollar store yesterday. So where did it go? It's there.
They want the ones that light up. Don't get these. Get the ones
Those are
that are
by
fun.
special
I mean.
request. Those are special requests only. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation.
And we don't want to see these balls around the council chambers during meetings.
Yes, we
You
do.
know, just all the department heads could come in with their balls and throw them at us.
Yeah, they'll have every reason.
Well, I want to thank you all, and I really want to thank Maria and Kita for putting it together.
Thank
Couldn't
you.
have done it without
Thank you
them.
for joining us. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Do you want to bring? We're going to take a break right now, and we will resume promptly at 11:45. Promptly. Finance Committee meeting is reconvening at 11:45, April 20th. The time, yeah, it is 11:45. We're continuing with presentations, and next up is our Office of Law, where we have our City Attorney, Michael Lyles, presenting. Is anyone else here? Okay.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My name is Mike Lyles, City Attorney. I manage the Office of Law. We have before you a handout and a PowerPoint of our budget request. Our budget request is really only asking for one enhancement at this point over previous years, over the previous budget year, FY22, and that is for a full-time FTE staff attorney position. That is the basis of our increase over the previous year. The other line items, contractual services and supplies and other, are decreased by about 2 or 3% each. As we've stated before, our Office of Law team includes 9 employees currently. Although we will be losing a legislative policy analyst, Ms. Jacqueline Lee, at the end of next week, and we'll have to hire another person to fill that position. So we're looking for a total with the enhancement of 10 employees to bring us to 4 attorneys, 5 attorneys total, but 4 assistant city attorneys. We have had a blockbuster year. The city of Annapolis has been engaged in a host of different activities, from street-end parks, water access, mail-in voting, recovery zones, parklets, and all of this, including a host of public works projects. As a result, we have been engaged in probably more litigation than the city has ever seen in its 300 years. We are one of the most successful offices of law in the state. We have saved with our activities, which is a very aggressive defense posture, the city over $5.5 million over the legal demands of those who have sued the city. One of our best cases to present working with the Office of Finance was to prevent a potential hit from the state of over $750,000. We aggressively defended that case and were able to reduce the ask from the state to about $160,000. All told, including the legal fees for outside counsel, we spent about $200,000 on that case, $220,000 on that case to bring the demand way down. We're very happy about that, and we thank Human Resources and Finance team for being the credible witnesses that they were and assisting us in putting a great defense. But we saved a lot of money in that case. We have currently 5 federal cases right now, 3 of them involving the HACA plaintiffs, one of them involving a opioid lawsuit, which we are glad to report has been resolved by the state. And even though it's not in my report, because the settlement amounts are coming, but we have a verbal assurance that they're coming, the city should receive about $1.2 million because of the lawsuit that the city engaged in to against the opioid manufacturers to pay us back for the impacts of that. So we should be receiving from the settlement about $1.2 million. Don't know when that's coming. The Attorney General is kind of in control of that, but we're looking forward to that. The 5th lawsuit is against the oil-producing fossil fuel companies and the impacts that the use of those products has produced in the city relating to climate change impacts. That's probably a longer 2 or 3 year process to get to the end of that, but it is a federal case that requires, along with the other federal cases, experienced lawyers and time and attention to ensuring that those cases are prosecuted in an appropriate way. In the case of the defense cases, we have to ensure that either internal attorneys handle those matters, which right now we all are doing our part in those matters. But to the extent we have to hire outside counsel also requires supervision to maintain costs, to ensure that they are litigating the cases properly and they're bringing them to a resolution. Other than that, the cases, as you can see there, range from basic negligence cases, slip and falls, the administrative case regarding the state pension department, and the class action suits relating to the housing authority. I mean, as you can see, 100% of the cases, or 97.1% of the cases that were litigated this year, we have been successful in defending. And so it's money well spent here in the Office of Law. We do have a list of accomplishments, and you can see that, let me see, for legal advice and defense, just kind of giving some color and context to some of the things we put in that first chart. We legal transactions, reviewed over 49 planning and zoning permits, a host of intergovernmental documents, 42 procurements, and a host of leases. Our proudest moments, of course, are providing help to the team to secure the Burtis House and the dock transfer, and to close the public-private partnership agreements related to the parking lot and the city dock. The city clerk and her team and the legal administration staff have processed 153 municipal infractions in Anne Arundel District Court. We have been successful in securing fines and fees and abatements in all 153 cases, including successfully processing and prosecuting 100 municipal infractions related to violations by the Housing Authority. We've successfully processed alcoholic beverage applications, resulting in revenue to the city of $474,000. And as you can see, a host of ordinances, resolutions, and city council agendas have been prepared by staff and reviewed by legal counsel. And workers' compensation, you can see there, we've been very successful in workers' compensation, although we do suggest some review of how we do workers' compensation and our levels, and some of that will be worked out hopefully in collective bargaining. But we've been very generous in the past. We have an aggressive defense-oriented approach now that has saved us a lot of money. And FY22 goals haven't really changed. We want to make sure that we represent the city and its officials before all courts, administrative tribunals, provide timely legal advice, meaning somewhere between 24 and 48 hours we can get an answer back, or we can at least let you know we're working on something and we'll respond in a timely way. We're going to provide legally sufficient, well-drafted, error-free legislation. We'll properly prepare and maintain legal and legislative election records and documents. And I would like to thank our clerk staff and her team for putting together an error-free election that included novel approaches to electioneering, which includes mail-in ballots, drop-in boxes for ballots that have been completed, as well as working with the Board of Supervisors of Elections to ensure that they had all they needed to actually see this whole process through, which was new and novel in a lot of different ways, including the lawsuit that we were effectively able to defend against. Let me see. We respond timely to public information requests. 100% of the responses are 30 days or less, and usually we can turn around responses in between 10 and 20 days. And all of the goals are pretty much the same as the previous year. And we have been very successful in meeting all of our goals, well above 90%, in most cases 100% effectiveness in meeting each of the goals. And with that, I'll take your questions.
Surprise for having
Yeah, okay. Just for clarity, I'm not sure where it is. Thank you very much.
No problem.
And I don't want to leave uncommented on the fact that we had an error-free election. Congratulations. That's really a big deal.
Well, Regina and her team did a great job, and the Board of Supervisor Elections was the driver of all of that, and we just provided the support, legal support, team administrative support, Regina and her team making sure that every ballot was counted, and making sure any confusion, clarification needed for the residents was provided, notices about where the drop boxes were, dealing with the mail-in voting process, making sure everything was printed up, and the council, of course, allowing us the additional budget to handle that. I think we budgeted about $200,000 to $300,000 to take care of all of that, and we actually ended up not using all of that and saving the city some money. So we had a very good election, and the team really pulled together to make that work.
It's interesting because I don't think it's a performance matrix, but if you look at the money saved, over your number of employees, your return on staff, if you will, is pretty high. So it's one way of looking at it. But my questions are not in order. If I look at the budget book, I'm a little confused because we are adding another attorney, and that number is in the budget, correct? But then when we look at the page 41 in the budget book where it has the staffing summary, we're losing the election admin assistant. So you're actually, how come that doesn't show the added attorney? That doesn't show the added attorney. It's funny how you guys go back and forth.
Yeah, no, I wanted to clarify that we didn't add a position to this budget.
It's
We
not in
added
there. Oh, okay.
a total of $100,000 of funding for contractual attorney or other contractual assistants instead of adding a full-time FTE.
So that's why the
position.
staff number is up.
No, the staff number is down because the election assistant doesn't work this year because we're done with the election.
No,
We
if I
bring
look-
her on.
If I look on page 42 at the top, salaries and benefits proposed
That's your step increases.
that's just step increases, that doesn't introduce another.
No, there's what Jody was mentioning earlier. I'm sorry, Jody, I'm gonna cut you off.
That's all right.
$100,000 is sitting there for a contractual employee as well. So step increases and then the $100,000 for contractual help.
So, but why isn't that in contractual services?
Because it would be a contractual employee.
And that's
Contractual
different than
employees are paid
contractual
through
services.
salaries. Contractors, consultants are paid through contractual services.
Okay, so right now, to address the city attorney's concern about added staff needed, you've included outside attorneys.
It would be funding for a contractual attorney, different than, we have, the Office of Law also has funding for outside contractual attorneys for specialization, those types of things.
So one thing I picked up from, among others, from the city attorney's presentation is that when you have outside counsel, it does take up time from the staff, making sure that outside counsel is doing their job. I think that's what you said. Am I
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So there is time spent, and that's an important. Do you know what I mean? That's time spent from existing staff that would not otherwise be needed. Just a point that I didn't want to lose.
Yeah, normally what happens when you hire attorneys outside, they can really impact your bottom line if they're not supervised appropriately. All of the material that they may provide to us in filing, if it's litigation or in transactional matters, still have to be reviewed because most of them, if none of them really work for the city and hold its principles in the type of regard as the folks working in the staff full time. So we still have to monitor and make sure that they're doing everything properly. Probably about 5-10% supervision over those folks.
Okay, so that we're clear, the mayor's budget as it says here, includes funding for an additional contract attorney or other contract services for interns or law.
Yes, two different types. One is the contractual employee, which is a separate employee type that you created last year.
Right.
That person would be in that position funded at for 1 year.
So what I don't know is if you hired another attorney, which I believe is what you're asking for, what would be the net add to the mayor's budget? Is that something?
So if we hire a civil service employee, right, we have to pay benefits, which if, let's say we paid them $90,000, we would have total comp at approximately $134,000. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
Is it a net? In other words, would the contractual person go away and you'd get a full-time person instead, city manager? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's either or. I don't think it's both.
It's
So I
either
think
or.
if you wanted to add additional money for a full-time, it would just be that incremental amount.
Could you speak to your reason, city manager, on why the mayor chose?
Because we're trying to not add additional positions. As I mentioned during the last presentation, we were tried to be very frugal with adding new positions because there's been a lot of discussion on the council that the personnel costs keep going up and up. And, you know, the way that happens most quickly is to add new employees. So we tried to be frugal with new employees.
So noted. Just wanted to evaluate efficiency and performance measures. Let me ask it this way, is by not having that position, city attorney, is it a detriment to meeting your performance measures? Or are you able to meet your performance measures with the way the budget is presented to us?
I would say we're pretty much at the end of what our effectiveness. In the 2 years that I've been here, 2.5 years, with budget decreases every year, we were able to be successful almost 100% in every category. That taxes all the people that are currently working, and there's only so much where you, if the work doesn't decrease over time, you get people leaving and transitioning out and burning them out. And it's my fear that we're going to get to a point where we can't handle the cases as they come due, and we will have to hire more attorneys outside. Right now, we've been able to effectively renegotiate all of the legal rates for all of the attorneys working for the city down to an average of $250, when in the past we were paying anywhere from $180 to $500 an hour. And so now that we've renegotiated these and everybody's pretty much at the $250 range, we've saved some money there. But, you know, as the cases get more complex and more numerous, we'll be hard pressed to negotiate those hourly rates down going into the future. So it's a choice that the council will have to make. But the point I've been making is saving $5.5 million in 1 year. You paid for itself with no increase. And all we're looking to do is make sure that you stay at that range of 100% effectiveness in all the cases. The municipal infractions against the housing authority aren't going away. The cases coming into the city are more numerous and more complicated. We've got federal cases now that we're barely hanging on, trying to defend and litigate against. And if I put a staff attorney on a federal case, for instance, which is somewhat complex, I don't have to pay them more but if I hire outside counsel, they have to work on the weekends. They have to work at night. Right now, we have to hire some outside attorneys to go to late night board meetings and commission meetings. Staff attorneys don't cost me extra to do that. But to the extent we get to the point where we can't have attorneys working every night, all night at boards and commission meetings, we're going to have to start hiring more attorneys outside. And I'm making provisions to lower the amount of attorneys, and as I've been over the last 2.5 years, to lower the amount of outside attorneys we hire as outside counsel. That's going to go down, but that means we're taking more internal to the office. And if we pay a person from a budget standpoint, I can monitor that pay over the long term, right? But if I've got to hire 3 law firms to handle whatever number of cases, you can't manage that from year to year. I can say it's 250 this year, but they're going to come back and say, well, we've got to increase our hourly rate to 300 because of the work. Or, okay, I've got 2 lawyers working on it and the budget is they've spent $168,000 of your money just because they billed it that way. I mean, they bill it because they got to do the work. It's just a way of looking at how you staff legal services. And I just think it's better to, if you look at a 5-year stretch, I know I've got to pay this person $150. But if I don't have that person, I have to go outside. I'm going to pay, like with the case that we had with the state, we paid those lawyers because we were very aggressive. And we had internal attorneys working on the matter too. I mean, we probably paid about $150,000, $160,000 when it's all said and done in legal fees. Had I had another hand working on it, we had 2 lawyers working on it, myself and Joelle Braithwaite, but had I had another staff person, we might have been able to do all of that in-house. So it's just, you can measure salary. But I can't determine from year to year how much we have to pay an outside counsel.
Okay. Two more questions. One is a follow-up to that. Is there any study you can present to the committee with that projection of what you just said, versus, what am I asking?
No, there's no study that I could produce because the time, the case will dictate
right.
Who I've got to go to, what firms might be available to handle it. Some firms may be available, some firms may not be. Even with the pension case, we couldn't really negotiate them down to the $250. We were still paying about $350. But we asked them to maybe not have the partner in all of the meetings and maybe have an associate attorney at a lower rate, $275, and they gave us a 5% break on the invoices. But at a point, we needed to get that work done, and I didn't have the hands to do it. So we had to hire outside counsel, and they were already working on the matter. But just when we want to be aggressive, we got to pay to be aggressive. But it saved us, $500,000-$600,000.
Yeah, the reason I'm sort of pursuing this is I'm just looking at risk analysis, and I don't know enough about our self-insurance and exposure there. So I know self-insurance is another fund, but when we're sued, the money comes out of that, and I can't help but blend the two together. Could someone speak to whether or not we have exposure in our self-insurance fund if we don't have the staff to solve these cases? How's that question?
So I can't, that's not my area of specialty.
It's not my
specialty. It's a legal question because you really have to blend our self-insurance together with the work that the Office of Law does.
Yes.
I have an employee, a risk manager, Corey, that works hand in hand with them on workers' comp claims to try to minimize our exposure and train our employees. And some of the costs that are incurred related to these cases do get transferred to the self-insurance fund, and some of the salary costs of the staff in the Office of Law also gets transferred to the self-insurance fund when they're working on those types of claims. They give us their time cards on a regular basis, and we move the funding over to the self-insurance fund.
Okay. And
so as far as exposure on cases, that's not going to be my specialty.
If I could just address
of course
the history of the staffing of the law office, because I think that's instructive, and I think that the point that the city attorney makes is very valid. But I think that the the way that the mission of the law office is carried out has changed over the years. When I got here, we had the city attorney and one contract employee that I'm not even sure was full-time. And it continued that way for a while. And clearly they didn't take on litigation. They hired firms to help with the litigation. So it was a different strategy. And then probably 7 years ago, maybe, Ashley Leonard was hired to do all the transactions. So again, she didn't do litigation, but she handled all the transactions. So at that point, we had two, and I think Gary by then was probably a civil service employee and had been converted. So at that point, we had three, and stayed there for a while. So it's a different way of doing things. We tried to sort of cut the baby in this case, where we didn't hire a full-time, but we provided $100,000 to provide additional law services, but without a full-time employee, thinking that might, because it does seem like have a peak number of lawsuits right now that have to be dealt with, and clearly the city attorney wants to handle those in-house and has been hugely successful doing that. So that's why we tried to split the baby by providing $100,000 for a contract employee.
And the Office of Law is a team player. We'll make it work with whatever we're given. You can cut the budget. We're still going to be as successful as we've always been. Just want to put a pin in that.
And then a very minor question. I know that we increased the fee or cost of these PIO requests. Was there any impact of that at all, or negligible?
It's negligible. No, the first 2 hours of any search or research for these Public Information Act requests is usually waived. I've taken the aggressive approach that everybody pays, because the requests are getting more complicated. They're getting more time sensitive, and we have fewer and fewer staff to do the work. And so the pay at least helps ameliorate the impact on the city from not doing assigned work to handling PIA requests. Yeah. So, and then when the assigned work needs to be done, now it has to be done quicker, and still with the level of quality that we demand. So
yeah, they're very time consuming.
Yes.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Lyles, I'm looking at the chart on page 3 where you list all the cases.
Yes.
And just for my own edification, what's a defense verdict?
Means that we got to trial, or the judge or the jury ruled in the city's favor.
So we won that case?
Yes.
Why are all of the cases, I guess it's 6 of them, something, where it says no offer and there was no payment, are those cases actually closed, or are they still pending in some form or fashion?
I'll give you a couple. The Hager case, kind of after Bozarth in the middle, that case is still ongoing. Trial is next week. So no offer means we didn't make an offer to settle, and they didn't make an offer to settle.
So is that similar for all of them? So potentially we could have to pay out that $4 million for all of those cases? Yes.
At some point, we couldn't reach agreement on any amounts before trial. And so those cases, Spearman is going forward. Bozarth is next week. Bozarth was closed. We won that case. Hager is going next week. And we consider any case where we haven't gone to trial in the year as a win for us. We've saved you money in that fiscal year by making sure that the case didn't come to closure in the fiscal year. Malone is a case that we have. It's a pretty new case. It's not going to go to trial this fiscal year. The Bowles case is not going to go to trial this fiscal year. It'll go to trial next fiscal year in September, but we think we'll be successful there. The Fisher estate and the Johnson are the Haka cases, and they're federal cases. They probably won't get to trial for another 2 years.
And that's the last one, the class action?
Yes, that's a Haka and plaintiff case.
Oh, okay. So, those may be expenses to us, just not at this point.
That's right, because we're looking just at the fiscal year. They're not expenses to you now. They may in some point in the future, but as the fiscal years go on, we'll adjust depending on where we are in the cases, and you'll see how and when they might hit us, if they ever do.
The 1.2 million settlement on the opioid case.
Yes.
So that is resolved, and we know for a fact that we're being awarded
Yes.
$1.2 million?
Yes, the Attorney General has issued a settlement grid that gave us what all the municipalities that partook in that case as a plaintiff, and our share of the settlement into the state of Maryland is $1.2 million approximately.
Is that a monthly, or not monthly? Is that a multi-state case?
It is.
Or is it just Maryland?
There are about 35 governmental plaintiffs, including states, counties, municipalities in the state of Maryland, and maybe more, but just in the state of Maryland. And the 1.2 million will have to be reduced by the amount of legal fees we'll pay to Mr. Joe Gormley, who was outside counsel, who tried or put that case for us into the court system.
Okay, so he'll get his share off the
off the top.
Of that. So our award is
it'll be less than 1.2, but the award is 1.2. We'll pay his legal fees. There'll be a negotiated resolution to his legal fees.
You negotiate his fee after the settlement?
I did.
I thought that would have been done ahead of time, but it's to our benefit.
Well, he had a retainer, and I thought based on the way that the case proceeded and how the case resolved itself and the work that he did, that the 33% was probably a little high. And he has agreed with me that he'll take something less than the 33%. We'll negotiate it, and he'll get something less than that.
I don't mean to get in the weeds on this, but thank you.
You're welcome.
The Haka case, page 6, the municipal infractions.
Yes.
Are we still going to court for each? I mean, I thought we were supposed to change the way we certified their buildings.
Well,
are we not?
The inspections keep coming and the violations keep coming. We have been directed to establish a repair fund agreement for Haka based on their request to the city council, that a repair fund be established for their fines. We're in the middle of coming to some agreement on what that fund looks like. But beyond that, if we can't get that established, there are cases on the books to be heard in court. We have 42 cases to be heard tomorrow. We've asked for a continuance because we are trying to work through this special fund situation or agreement where Haka wanted the city to continue to fine them, but put the fines in a special repair fund for them to do the repairs. So if we can come to an agreement, those 42 cases and maybe cases going forward won't come back to a court hearing. But if we can't agree, then we'll be hearing those cases.
I guess on the chart on page 3, the class action still, is that a second class action, or is that I thought we settled one.
Yeah, this is the first class action involving plaintiffs who reside in the Haka residence.
So the other one wasn't a class action?
It was not.
Okay. And lastly is your enhancements, and you only have one. Everything else that you have indicated is in the mayor's budget? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
You sound a little unsure.
We ask for what we ask for, and what is in front of you is what is produced.
Okay, so, well, I'm asking you the question. The new attorney is not included in the mayor's budget, but the 100,000 is. Is that correct? Okay. And so I think you were asked this question before, but I'm going to ask it again. So there's a $50,000 difference between the cost of a new attorney and the cost of needing outside attorney.
Well, it's really it'll be an employee who is under a contract. So the contract will be for 1 year, for 12 months. So from July 1 to June 30, should that be approved?
Yeah, that's what I just said. It's a $50,000 difference. My question, I guess, is, are they comparable? Meaning in capability, are they both contract positions? Is the attorney going to be a contract position or a?
It will be an employee who has a contract, meaning he or she will be a term employee working for only 12 months.
Okay, with all the rights and benefits thereof?
Some rights and some benefits. In the new contract situation that we've established or you've established, we don't give them all the benefits. We take out taxes, and I think that there's some retirement that we contribute to on their behalf out of that money.
Okay, so that's the 150,000 potentially.
No, the 150,000 was the FTE enhancement that I requested that was denied, and then the 100,000 is what was the mayor put in for the
support in lieu of?
Yeah, if I may.
Not really
look at
sure.
your Slide 22 while Alderwoman Finlayson is talking.
Put your mic on.
Yeah, if I may, could we look at your Slide 22 while Alderwoman Finlayson is discussing this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because the way we see it is that the ad for staff is $150,000 max, but right now we're including $100,000 in salaries for the consultant. And so we're looking at it as a $50,000 net ad.
Right, but it's really, you got to look at it's an FTE, so that money will be there in my budget, but the 100,000 would not be. It's 1 year, so you're just looking at a slice of time.
Well, my question is, if we didn't add the additional 50,000, if we added an additional 50,000, you could get a full FTE.
Yeah, because that amount includes the benefits.
Right.
You know, all the full range of benefits.
If we do not, what would the role of the $100,000 person?
It would be the same role. They'd be doing the same work, and to the extent that there is a portion of benefits that is paid under the contract, that'll reduce what the person gets in net.
But that would be within $100,000.
Yeah, that's my max I have.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I think that exhausts my questions. Thank you.
Alderman Neal, do you have any questions? No. Thank you. Alderman Savage's questions were answered in your presentation, so thank you very much. Alderman Arnett, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to follow up. I'm looking at the OpenGov, and I cannot find this 100,000.
It's embedded in the salary number. 90,000 is embedded in the salary number. 10,000 is in benefits.
So the salaries projected for 22, 1.3 million, and they're in fiscal 23, it's 1.5 million. So that's part of the 1.5 million?
That's correct.
Thank you. And so there wouldn't be, if it's contract services, there wouldn't be an increase in benefits, although I do see a big increase in benefits.
It'd be a contractual employee, and we have to pay FICA FICA is included in
Okay.
benefits.
All right, thank you. So, thank you, Mr. Lyles, for your presentation. I want to go to slide 16, or actually, I want to go back to slide 3 that Alderwoman Finlayson was asking about. And I'm looking at some of these smaller cases, ones that are $20,000. I know at one point the Office of Law had a policy when it was a small amount of money, like for the trip and fall case here, we would just settle it rather than litigate. I'm taking that you're litigating it as part of our more aggressive policy to just not let those slide because we don't want to encourage a whole slew of these small slip and fall type cases.
That's my thinking, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That makes sense to me as well. So going to slide 16, which if I could find it.
I have it up.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about some of these points here. So number 2, we've been watching increase in changes whenever legislation comes through to clarify grammar and things like that. But we also are watching more and more things go from code to rules and regs, promulgation of rules and regs. My concern is I don't know where to find all of these rules and regs showing up on the city website, which was part of that ordinance when we passed it earlier last year. And there are a lot of things going on right now in terms of things like the parkettes and so forth, the way we're handling the outdoor dining that don't seem to be coming through the rules and reg process, which is promulgated on the website, 30-day notice, review by the rules committee, and then it becomes a rule and reg. We had one recently that came to rules. It was with the harbor master. So I'm concerned that we're not really carrying through. And I guess my question out of that is, do you think the requirement to make the promulgation of rules, make sure that it's followed, is with the Office of Law, or does that requirement reside someplace else?
Well, it's a team effort. I mean, first, the regulation, which would be enforced and interpreted by the department, has to come from the department, and we would help to draft whatever the department wants to put out and publicize and make sure that it's done in accordance with the code. So it does germinate there. It's a department that needs the regulation. They've got to put the regulation and develop the regulation. We will assist with the development of the regulation and making sure that it gets posted and all of that. I would say, though, that to the extent that the council feels a need to regulate through the code, there's probably less regulation that's going to get done because the council wants to do more specific detailed regulation by passing code sections. And so that's probably why we haven't had a lot right at this point.
No, when I drafted the ordinance, I agreed with the philosophy that you espouse, which is there's a lot in code that really ought not be there. It gives us a lot less flexibility because if you want to change rules, you have to go and change the code. Whereas if you want to promulgate a change in rules, you could just post it and do it. But we had things like not too long ago, short-term rentals were very topical. And I haven't seen the rules and regs about how we're following the adjudication of short-term rental rules and regulations. There's a lot of things that were long time in rules and regulations. The ABCB, the Alcoholic Controlled Beverage, has 32 pages of rules and regulations, which I can't find. I don't think they're promulgated at all. So I'm not arguing with the rules, move to rules and regs. And we had kind of a tacit agreement, I hope the city manager agrees, that the things that we would deal with largely through this new process would be things that would touch our constituents. So internal rules and regulations, how you inspect a storm drain or something like that, not promulgated publicly. But I guess I'm bringing this up because I have a concern. I think there's a long way to go to fulfill the promise of moving out of code into rules and regulation. Your point 3, I like, but I'm wondering how you plan to reduce litigation, because it seems to me that's external forces. I think it's a laudable goal, but how do we do that?
Yeah. It's a strategy to ensure that, we negotiate the cases that should be negotiated, of course, to properly vet the cases initially, and to drive down the areas of risk across the city. We work with risk manager to ensure that we don't make the same mistakes twice, and that helps to drive down litigation. But it's a work in progress. The kinds of cases we see maybe in the past couple of years, we've just refused to litigate and pay out on those cases, even though people want to sue us. We just say, no, we are not responsible for your injury. And after a review, talking to staff, and sometimes folks go away because of that. Sometimes they don't, they'll come back. But, we've managed to keep a close eye on litigation exploding, because we're very good at making sure that we investigate properly and push back at the appropriate time on some of these cases. And sometimes the lawyers listen to us and they go away. I'll give you a case example. We had a young lady in Forest Drive walking across a parking lot that the city did not own, and she was injured. And the attorneys wrote letters to everybody. We could have litigated that case. We just did our investigation, sent them a plat, and showed them that the city doesn't own that plat. So rather than get into a back and forth and complaint and answer and discovery, we just provided them information and helped them assess that the city wasn't the right defendant in this matter. So sometimes it's just that.
So I'm glad you answered it the way you did, because I think there is some coordination. I have a little bit of familiarity with the bicycle case, which is something where the manholes were not properly secured, and the bicycle wheel got caught in that, and it was a long-standing thing. So, pardon? Yeah. Okay, never mind. I'll move on.
Yeah.
I want to give a compliment.
Okay.
Item 5.
Yes.
It has really been noticeable that your staff are coming to our boards and commission meetings, and I think it has made a difference. So I appreciate those are usually in the evening, and it is an extra workload, but under your leadership, you've been very conscientious with that, and it has not gone unnoticed. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we were successful in supporting a Board of Appeals decision all the way up to Court of Special Appeals. We keep winning and winning, but the other parties keep suing and suing. But we have been successful in getting the court to see that the Board of Appeals decisions are appropriate and legal and should not be overturned. So going to those meetings helps us understand the thought processes and making sure that the decisions are appropriately drafted, publicized, and done in a legally defensible way. So that's been very helpful. Thank you so much.
Could I just piggyback on number 2 on the city code? And this might be a question for the city manager. The council has heard of transferring to form-based zoning. The law office has taken some initiative in cleaning up the code, for lack of a better word. There's a lot of discussion about how the code needs to really be revised. what's our plan? I mean, is it for each department to look at it? And who is more proactive in doing so? Is there thought about having a consultant? It's probably something I probably should have asked Mr. Malinoff as well.
Yeah, well, I know the form-based zoning is coming. I think that's Title 15, and that department, Park and Planning, is doing an overhaul of Title 15, so that should be coming.
Yeah.
With respect to the most of the code and the revisions, we put that in a previous budget, and we were denounced for that position, so we've removed it from our initiative list. But to the extent that we have identified certain areas where there are conflicts in the code section, or some that we've dealt with council members where there was a prohibition against a thing, but there was no penalty. So we've asked either that code section be removed or to add a penalty. We've just recently done that in a couple of instances. So it's really just, sometimes we find these things just because we're reviewing the code on a regular basis. The legislative analyst is very important at that. When an idea for a code change comes, we have to look at other parts of the code to determine whether they conflict or not. So that's what you see sometimes in some of the meetings where we have to maybe reconsider a provision or bring something up that you had never thought about, because we're trying to clean up in pieces where certain code provisions just aren't legally defendable.
So that brings me to, and this does tie into your goals, and I don't mean to get into any sort of, position description or whatever, but we will have a void in Jacqueline, I shouldn't mention it, in that position leaving. So when you look at that position being filled, is there any opportunity there for that person to be focused more on, I mean, as she would look, when we would give legislation to her, she would look at the code overall and say, it isn't just changing this, that affects this. So that approach sort of ultimately cleans up the code, if you will,
Yes.
and that's very refreshing. I've noticed that, it's stuff that you see can be changed throughout. So is that position still focused on that, and will you enhance that effort?
Yes, the position is focused on that. Hopefully we will get somebody with the level of experience that the current individual has, hopefully more experience. Yeah. And we'll continue to address these matters as they come up, and we really ask. Even some of the citizens in the past have pointed out things that we brought to the council and said that, we researched it, it's unconstitutional, it needs to be changed. Right. We've had a couple of those in the recent past. So we'll continue to do that on a case-by-case basis, but we are reviewing it every day. But hopefully the legislative analysts that we bring on will continue the more universal approach at just finding things on their own initiative.
Right. To continue to make sure that request is legally sufficient, et cetera. Okay.
Yes, we will continue to do that.
Thank you. Alderwoman, do you have a follow-up?
I do have a follow-up. Mr. Lyles, how are you handling Ms. Lee's departure? Who's covering in her absence?
We're trying to figure it out now, but I haven't quite determined how to do all the things that she does. We are in the middle of a transition, and we hopefully will post the position shortly, and have some candidates to get in place. But right now, it's probably going to be a mix of the attorneys helping to do, along with Regina, the city clerk, and her staff.
Is there an opportunity to bring in someone tentatively who has had the kind of, the legislature just ended, and I would guess that there may be some, I don't know what they're called in the legislature, but assistants there that may be able to fill in.
That's a good idea. I hadn't thought about that. I was hoping to move quickly on the position, getting it posted. I think, though, the way have structured the transition, I think, based on what's going on with legislation and ideas for legislation. Some of that is pushed off because of the budget, and that's helpful in giving us some space to publicize the position and hire somebody. If it's 30 days, which I'm hoping, we won't take more than that. Hopefully we can fill the position.
Do you think that we're not going to have legislation just because we're sitting up here every day dealing with finance?
Well, I mean, I think that any legislation that comes, we'll be able to handle it, in the transition, between myself and other staff attorneys who can draft, and, we'll figure it out.
Well, you know how I feel about putting more on an already full plate. I'm just saying, so.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you have a?
Yes, I want to ask a clarifying question. Can you go back to slide 22, please? Attorney 1, are you asking for an assistant city attorney?
Yes.
Okay. And not a staff?
Staff
So it wouldn't be
attorney.
someone
I just call them staff.
Okay.
But the position is assistant city attorney.
Thank you.
Attorney 1.
Is that the same, assistant city attorney
is.
and attorney 1?
It
It's
is.
the same?
I think in the civil service review from last year, we eliminated attorney 1 and attorney 2 and just created assistant city attorney. Not really sure why that says attorney 1, but it's probably an error in the drafting. Because we just didn't need to have 2. We just needed the whole range of salary and call them an assistant city attorney. If I hired someone who was more junior, they would get paid less, than a person who was. We just didn't need to have the 2 break down, because I thought that someone gets in the attorney 1 and they might get trapped in that, and I couldn't bring them to attorney 2. But with the range, what we did with the civil service review was have assistant city attorney, and the range is from low to high. And I could hire whoever the experience fit and pay them what their experience requires. But the 90 is not the stated range, it's the range I thought I could get someone to be in the position based on the experience level that I was looking for. But the range goes, I think, down to about 65 is the bottom range for an assistant city attorney right now.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Kendall Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things. Mr. Lyles, first of all, thank you all for the very, very, very hard work that you do. I can certainly appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if there are any state and federal mandates that we definitely have no control over, that would possibly increase your workload.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's something that we can't even predict.
Not really. We can't predict it from year to year. The issue with the policing has taken up a considerable amount of staff time with meetings and reviews and responding to county officials, state officials, and city officials throughout the process.
Now, that was something that we kind of saw coming.
Yeah,
To some degree,
we saw it coming. We didn't see the complexity and the fluid nature of it all coming the way it did, and some of it wasn't worked out totally. So it left a lot of gaps. And so what that means is that we have to have staff time available to assist departments with how they respond to each of the gaps.
I will say that your 97.1 success rate, and I'll take your word for it, is unbelievable. But it's believable.
Thank you.
And I have a question, I guess, for our finance director, who's been here a shorter period of time than our city manager, for both of you. Can anyone in memory, recent past memory, recall any department that has saved $5.5 million for the city?
I can't remember, but remember it's cost avoidance. So it's not money in hand that we were going to spend and we didn't. So
I understand
it
that.
avoided us spending that amount of money, which is still, it's still really, really important. But no, I can't remember that.
At this point, I mean, no one has brought it to your attention the way Mr. Lyles has. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lyles.
You had a data point there, though, City Attorney Lyles, didn't you? Didn't you say something in the history of Annapolis on the case? You in your presentation,
Yeah, we're not aware in the history of the city that we've been this
there was
effective.
some stat you gave us that was commending that. You don't remember? Okay. I'm just throwing you a softball there, but I
Well, 97.1 is high, and then with the municipal infractions, I mean, 100% success rate on municipal infractions, either getting fines or abatements.
yeah.
Is a good track record.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
That's great. We hope you fill that position sooner than later, because I'm sure the legislation requests are still coming.
We'll do whatever's required, and we thank you so much for listening to us today.
All right. We have a request from your department. No,
Give him the latest.
Yeah, no, this came from, I guess it's getting around because we had a specific request for this ball, but I won't say from who. But don't make me throw it, you throw it.
Not bad, though.
Terry.
Yeah, I'm going to invite Corey to these meetings.
We're all children at heart. Someone said, well, so-and-so got that, why can't I have that? But thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome in the Office of Law. We pride ourselves on not having any balls. Thank you.
All right. Where is that agenda?
Thing that was raised for us.
Tomorrow, we have Parks and Recs, and we've given them, this is a little bit of a tweak, we've given them the whole time. Finance, we've moved to a date to be determined. So, David, you relate that to the department that they have no excuse but to finish their presentation.
So one question I had is,
Is that the one that was canceled?
next week, Thursday morning is open because we have next week, Thursday, the 28th is open because we have a council work session in the afternoon. Do we want to take advantage of that time for overflow and we could put finance in there? No. Okay. And,
Sorry, I'm not here that day.
okay.
On the 28th, I'm completely.
Oh, that's right.
And you just
I
said something
heard that
about
from
the
the mayor.
28th.
It was they're having a going away event for Jacqueline, so they wanted us to finish by 1.
Yeah, the other thing is Tuesday, that trial that the city attorney mentioned. Since I'm the named defendant on that, I have to be there. And that's the day that the mayor and city manager budgets are meant to be presented. Tuesday the 26th, yeah. So
What do we do?
I'll have to figure out when I make my presentation. We can still do the mayor and the other ones, mayor and HR.
So who's scheduled for that day? Who's scheduled for the 26th?
Mayor, city manager, and HR.
HR and
Mayor
city manager?
and city manager.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
and
you're
Office of Community Services. They're all.
so you're not available. I'm not hearing well, obviously.
No, I have to be at that trial that,
Okay,
the city
okay.
attorney mentioned.
So who can we move up?
Well,
Because
we
we
can
have 2
move
days
finance
with one.
into that slot. We can move finance into that slot since we're bumping them from tomorrow. And then just find another time for city
So
manager.
finance will go on the 26th?
Does that work, Jody?
Yeah, that's fine. That's better than tomorrow.
Yes, okay.
Okay, so the 20, so I'm sorry, what happens to the,
We're taking the city manager's office off?
just city manager, right? And
What was the other one?
it's mayor and HR.
And Office of Community Services.
Yeah, which will be with the city manager presentation.
Office of Community Services is with the city manager,
Yeah.
so we need to find a slot for you.
Community grants is on the 2nd. I don't know if they're going to need the 3 hours.
Which date is that?
May
Kate?
2nd, Monday?
Oh, we're in May. Oh, we are.
Well, and we have
Unless
to
I have
talk
a
about
old
how we're
schedule.
going to handle community grants as to whether we're going to speak to the candidates or not. I
Well-
mean, the nonprofits.
Yeah, we just, we have a second here. How did we compile the community grants? Was that a committee?
Yeah, we did the same process that we've done in the past. So
So
we had
they
a committee. The committee was chaired by Aaron Lee, who's in community services. Had the same other people that we had last year. So they've looked at all the applications and they'll make the recommendations.
Okay, so that's the first time Erin did that, right?
First time
Yeah,
she
so
did. I think she participated before, but she didn't
Oh.
chair the
So she'll
group.
present,
But then we have to decide, because we have an opportunity to question the nonprofits about their,
right, yeah. And they're in the budget as a first pass by that committee. They're in that way, so then,
They have their recommendations. So it's just recommendations coming to y'all.
So do we invite them in individually then?
Yep, turn her mic.
When
yeah,
you say they,
we've
who?
had, in some years, yes,
Your
some,
mic.
turn on your mic, she's saying. Some years we've had them, we set aside a day and have them come in.
So can we do that on the 2nd, or is that not appropriate?
So that's why I'm asking what their process was. I don't want to bring them in if they've already been brought in by the committee.
I don't think the committee met with them. Did the committee meet with the nonprofits? But that's a whole different,
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure
Yeah.
that they did. We got
I
a
don't
lot
think
of
so either.
applications, a lot of packages, and they were very, very comprehensive applications. So I'm not sure that they needed to meet. So
did we get the packets of all the applications? I don't think we did.
I don't
we
think you
being
did.
you or we being us?
Us.
No,
No, there'd
no,
be
they came.
huge.
They came directly to.
I think we're going to need a copy.
Okay.
So
It's a very large stack.
Yeah,
So-
if it's
Yeah.
in paper form, I don't know if we'll be scanning them in. If they may have scanned them in, hopefully, so we can send electronic files.
There's a code is there a code, I should know the answer to this, and I think I have it, but on this process, is that a codified process by the committee? Or is that, I just don't want their work
I'm not
to,
sure if it was a council resolution or if
or
it's
something.
I would hope it's more of a resolution than actually in the code, but
Okay,
yeah, we'll check and see what the source of that was.
right, I just want to see what work was done and what was the basis for their first pass, for lack of a better word. Maybe
Yep,
before
they'll-
that date.
They'll be prepared to
They'll be
provide
prepared to speak to
all
that.
that. And
Well,
I think they
we
set up
owe
a
them
scoring
that.
sheet, so all of the scores too.
They have a score, the force ranking and all that kind of stuff. Okay, okay.
And that's usually part of their packet,
Right.
with
Right.
how their rating system is set up. But it is hours after. The committees are recommendations.
Correct, but I don't, just so that we look like a united front, if you will, I don't think we need to bring the community organizations in before us if we know for sure that they have been involved in this process. Does that,
We may have
We'll find out. I mean, that's certainly your discretion to do that or not, but we'll find out if they were brought in front of the
right,
committee.
we just don't know, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do not believe that they were. I spoke with one nonprofit, and
yeah, there's
the
something.
questions that were
There's
asked.
there's something.
Do you want your mics on? Is that what you're saying? The mics have to be on.
Yeah, we'll discuss that offline, I think. Definitely discuss offline.
Well, there's one other thing I'd like to bring to your attention, and I guess you can find it. I had inquired about the demographics by department.
Correct.
It's not unconstitutional to ask for it, and it's been sent to us already by the HR. So it's in, where is it?
In the share, is that?
In the shared file?
The shared file?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I'm not an attorney, but I think what the city attorney was saying, that in a public presentation, asking for it was different than getting it from human resources.
Well, it's public information, so,
Yeah, he was just concerned about the process for getting those numbers and what definitions we used for each of the racial categories.
Right, that was when
Because it's not quite as, I guess, simple as we all
Yeah,
think it
that's
is,
when I asked
right?
for it from everybody.
I probably asked the question incorrectly that set this whole thing in motion. But we have always been able to look at the demographics because our objective should be to have a workforce that looks like the city that we represent. And particularly in those departments where they're recruiting new members, police and fire, there should be some direction as to what they are looking for. So anyway, the document is in the shared folder, and I can't find it, but you guys probably can.
Well, human resources is coming before us, so that would be a good topic to discuss at that time as well.
Well, I had requested, and Tricia responded, and she sent it, and then Brian stopped in and said, it's already in your shared folder.
Alrighty, okay. I think we're done with the agenda. Can I entertain
All
a
right, we
motion?
got 5 minutes to
adjourn?
spare. This is an anomaly. Turn on your mic.
It's on.
It's already
sorry.
on.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. All right.
So we still need a home for the city manager to present.